At a busy intersection, a racist officer targets a young black teen for wearing a gold chain. The confrontation escalates in front of stunned onlookers, ending with a symbolic act of humiliation. But the boy's silent dignity hints at something deeper, and the crowd's phones catch more than the cop expects. "That's not real gold, boy. You people don't wear stuff like that unless it's stolen." The words snap through the air like a whip. Downtown Atlanta buzzed with the usual morning chaos. Coffee cups, car horns, commuters. But now, right outside a city courthouse, the flow stopped. People paused mid-step. Conversations died in. Throats. A crowd slowly circled around the scene, unfolding near the courthouse steps. And every phone was lifted. Officer Brent Cooper stood tall in his Navy uniform, sunglasses reflecting the morning sun, jaw tight with manufactured confidence. He had one hand on his belt, the other pointing directly at a black teen no older than 17. The boy wore jeans, a pressed white tee, and around his neck a small but shining gold chain. Nothing flashy, just real. His name was Jalen. He said nothing, his expression didn't even flinch. Not at first. A man in a suit hesitated nearby, briefcase in hand. A mum with a stroller angled herself between parked cars. A food delivery. Biker stopped mid-swipe on his phone, eyes locked on the boy, on the cop, on the chain. Cooper took a step closer. I said, "Where'd you get it, huh?" He barked, voice louder now. "That's yours? Or some five-finger discount at the mall?" Jalen's hands stayed at his sides. He didn't move, didn't raise his voice. He just looked the officer dead in the eyes. "I bought it," he said quietly. Cooper smirked like he'd heard a bad joke. "You think that's a joke? What, your mama pawn her food stamps for it?" A murmur rippled through the crowd, but Cooper didn't care. He was used to it, the subtle chuckles of power, the quiet compliance. He'd built his career on these street-side humiliations, on making people like Jalen feel small, on reminding them who's really in control. Jalen blinked slowly. The heat wasn't from the sun now, it was coming from the officer's gaze, and from the dozens of strangers watching, filming, judging, waiting. Then Cooper reached. He didn't ask, didn't pause, didn't warn. His fingers shot out and yanked the chain off Jalen's neck with one violent pull. The chain snapped. The gold caught the light midair and hit the sidewalk with a faint tink. Gasps. Someone cursed. A woman put her hand to her mouth. A child whispered, "Why'd he do that?" Jalen didn't move, just stared at the broken chain on the ground, and for a second it looked like he'd break too. But then he bent down slowly, picked up the chain, brushed off the dust, and stood back up. Straight, tall, silent. He looked at Cooper again, and then just 5 words. "You should Google my mother." The cop's jaw twitched. "What'd you just say to me?" Jalen didn't repeat it. He didn't have to. The crowd shifted. Whispers turned to questions. The bystanders leaned forward. Not away. A young woman whispered to her friend, "Did he say his mom?" Phones were still filming, still rolling. One even caught the exact moment Cooper's face lost just a hint of color. The courthouse doors behind them creaked open. A bailiff stepped out, scanned the crowd, and paused when his eyes landed on Jalen. He nodded. Once. Jalen looked at Cooper one last time. Then he walked away. Calm. Collected, chain in hand. He didn't run. He didn't flinch. He just walked. Right. Up the steps. Cooper stared after him, confused, stiff, like something didn't compute, because it didn't. The crowd parted like the Red Sea, and one man said aloud what they were all thinking. "Wait. He's going into the courthouse?" Another murmured, "Who is his mom?" Jalen didn't look back. But behind him the weight had already shifted, the narrative had cracked, and Officer Cooper had no idea. He hadn't just ripped off a chain, he'd ripped open a courtroom. Jalen pushed the tall oak door open. The air inside the courtroom was colder, conditioned, serious. Every heel click on the polished floor echoed like punctuation. Lawyers whispered to clients. Clerks shuffled papers. But when Jalen stepped in, several heads turned, a black teenager walking alone into a courtroom, clutching a broken chain in his hand like it meant more than money. He didn't rush. He didn't sit. He walked straight to the far-right bench, the kind reserved for guests of the court or witnesses not yet called. One of the assistant clerks gave him a quick glance, then did a double take. "Isn't that—" Jalen said nothing. His calm was a strange kind of armor. Not the arrogant silence of rebellion, something else, like he knew where he was. Like he'd walked these marble floors before. A few minutes passed. The bailiff stepped in again. "All rise for the Honorable Judge Langston." The room stood like a reflection. Footsteps entered from the back chamber, heels on wood. The energy shifted before anyone even saw her. Authority has a scent, a gravity. Judge Naomi Langston walked in with it stitched into her stride. Black robe, silver necklace, braids pulled back with intention, eyes sharp as courtroom gavel strikes. She moved to her seat. Everyone sat, except Jalen. He stayed standing. The judge looked up and finally met his eyes. A flicker. Barely a second. But enough. She nodded, almost imperceptibly. Jalen sat. "Court is now in session," the bailiff announced. Today's case was one of significance, a class action lawsuit filed by multiple victims of racial profiling against the city police department. Civil rights attorneys filled one side, city attorneys filled the other. Cameras weren't allowed in the room, but reporters waited outside like wolves behind glass. For the first half hour, no one mentioned Jalen. He sat still, a statue in the corner, eyes on the judge. But then the doors opened again. Brent Cooper walked in, still in uniform, but without swagger now. Something about him looked off. He wasn't limping, but he moved like someone bracing for a punch that hadn't landed yet. He walked straight to the clerk's desk and whispered something, slid a form forward. The clerk blinked. "You're filing a civilian complaint?" "Yes," Cooper said through gritted teeth. "Against whom?" He hesitated, then pointed. "That kid." Whispers immediately spread through the courtroom like wildfire. "Judge." Langston looked up slowly. "Officer, come forward." Cooper stiffened. "Yes, Your Honor." He walked to the front, but avoided looking toward Jalen. The judge steepled her fingers. "Please explain to this courtroom what incident you believe merits a complaint. During an active investigation of police misconduct, no less." Cooper cleared his throat. The suspect was loitering near a government building. He was acting suspicious, wearing a chain that appeared to be stolen property. I attempted to question him, and he was uncooperative." "Uncooperative?" Langston repeated coldly. "Yes, Your Honor." Jalen didn't blink. The judge tilted her head. "And what exactly did this uncooperative behavior look like?" He refused to give a receipt for the chain. The entire courtroom froze. A soft snort escaped from someone in the back row. An attorney shifted in his chair, trying not to smirk. One of the court clerks covered her mouth with a hand. Langston's voice dropped lower, almost a whisper. "And did you request a receipt from any of the white citizens wearing jewelry this morning?" Silence. "No, Your Honor." "And what did you do next?" "I confiscated the chain." "You mean you ripped it off his neck?" she corrected, her tone suddenly knife-sharp. Cooper swallowed. "Yes, Your Honor." Judge Langston leaned back. Her gaze shifted slowly to Jalen. Then she spoke, clear and commanding. "Jalen, please, rise." He stood. "Please tell the court your full name for the record." The room held its breath. Jalen Isaiah Langston. Every head turned. The silence was thunderous. Cooper turned a shade paler than the courtroom lights. Judge Langston tapped her gavel once. Complaint dismissed. She stood. "We are now taking a 30-minute recess. Officer Cooper, remain in this courtroom. Everyone else dismissed for now." The gavel struck again. Jalen stepped down from his seat and walked toward his mother. As the murmuring courtroom cleared out, one of the reporters managed to whisper to another on the way out. He filed a complaint against the judge's son. and the reply, wide-eyed, he just ended his own career. The courthouse doors burst open like a dam breaking. Reporters sprinted down marble steps, clutching mics and phones, gasping half-formed headlines between each breath. Did you hear what she said? Langston, Jalen Langston, he's the judge's kid. You got video. Please tell me you got video. By the fountain just outside the courthouse plaza, the murmurs had already gathered critical mass. What started as whispers became full-blown buzz, drowning out even the fountain's rush. Courtroom staff emerged, exchanging glances. Attorneys who hadn't seen the morning session were now glued to phones, scrolling for leaked clips. At the center of it all, walking like the eye of a storm, was Jalen. No hoodie pulled over his head, no attempt to run or hide. He walked like he had nothing to prove. Because he didn't. People moved out of his way instinctively. Some stared. A few called out, "Hey, young man, were you really... Is it true you're Judge Langston's son?" Jalen didn't answer. He didn't need to. The footage that had hit social media was louder than anything he could say. In one clip, you could clearly hear Cooper's voice. "Where'd you steal that from?" Then the sound of the chain ripping. Then Jalen's quiet voice. "You should Google my mother." And then, of course, the look on Cooper's face when the judge said the name. Jalen Isaiah Langston. The clip had hit over 200,000 views in just 20 minutes, and it was only rising. Back inside the building, Cooper sat in a conference room, jaw locked, staring at the table. Across from him sat two men from Internal Affairs. Clean suits, no expressions. "Tablets open, pens ready." "Officer Cooper," one of them said, "we'd like to revisit a few entries in your record." "This is ridiculous," Cooper muttered. "Then you shouldn't have filed a formal complaint on a judge's child during an active civil rights case." "I didn't know he was her son." "Exactly." The first investigator leaned forward. "And you didn't ask." "Silence. Let's go over your stop and frisk record again," the second added, "especially the one involving that elderly man in Midtown last fall." "That had nothing to do with this," Cooper said, voice tight. "It's all pattern." "Officer, it always is." The two men exchanged a glance. One tapped his tablet. "We'll need your body cam footage from this morning." "It wasn't activated." Dead pause. "You approached a civilian. You confiscated private property in front of witnesses. And your camera was off?" Cooper shifted in his seat. "It's been glitching." "That's funny," the other investigator said, expression still neutral. "Because according to maintenance logs, it was inspected last week, signed off as fully functional." Cooper opened his mouth, closed it again. Back outside, Jalen had reached the far edge of the plaza. His friend Isaiah stood waiting under a tree, phone out, eyes wide. "Dude," Isaiah whispered. "You broke the internet." Jalen gave a half-smile. "I didn't do anything." "You didn't have to." Isaiah grinned. "You just stood there and watched that man evaporate." Jalen looked out over the plaza, watching the swarm of media like it wasn't even about him. "I wasn't going to let him take something from me and act like I was the one who should be ashamed." Isaiah nodded slowly. Jalen turned. "I just gave him the chain." "But you didn't let him keep the story." Just then, Jalen's phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. It was a single line. "He's trying to spin the media. Be careful." Jalen stared at it, then looked up, just as a local TV crew started heading in his direction. His mother's words echoed in his mind from long ago. "Sometimes the courtroom begins before the trial ever starts." He slipped the broken chain into his pocket and walked straight toward the cameras. A makeshift podium had been rushed into place in front of the precinct's brick facade, flags on either side, police logo behind. Microphones wired in so fast, some were still duct-taped to the stand. Officer Brent Cooper stood tall, flanked by two fellow officers who looked uncomfortable even being there. Camera crews from every local network lined the street. Reporters stood shoulder to shoulder. A few even live-streamed straight from their phones. No press release had been sent. This was damage control in real time. Cooper cleared his throat. "Good afternoon. I want to take a moment to address the misinformation spreading about this morning's interaction between myself and a young individual outside the courthouse." A few reporters raised their eyebrows. Others just smirked. Cooper continued, voice calm but clipped. The individual was behaving suspiciously, loitering. His body language was evasive. Based on prior experience, I made a decision to question him about the chain he was wearing. He adjusted the mic. "It's being said I used force. That's a misunderstanding. I retrieved what I believed might be stolen property for verification." A young journalist from Channel 4 raised her hand and didn't wait to be called on. "Officer, Cooper, was the chain ever reported stolen?" "No." "Then on what grounds did you remove it from his person?" "I had reasonable suspicion." "Because he's black?" The question landed like a slap. Cooper blinked. "Because of the situation." Another reporter jumped in. "Are you aware the teen is the son of Judge Naomi Langston?" I was not. "So you filed a complaint against the son of a presiding judge during a civil rights abuse trial based only on your assumption?" I followed protocol. Laughter, thin and dry, bubbled from the back of the press group. Then someone stepped forward, a young woman in a red blouse. She didn't hold a mic. She wasn't with any outlet. Just a regular person. Her phone. "What's up, recording everything?" "I was there," she said. The crowd turned toward her. "I saw the whole thing. He didn't do anything. He just stood there. You didn't ask him a thing before you grabbed that chain. You snatched it like he was property." Cooper's jaw tensed. "Ma'am, this is an official press." "You didn't even look at him like a human being." "Just a problem. You thought no one would say anything, but we filmed you, all of us." She turned her phone around. On her screen, the video, in full HD, sound crystal clear. Dozens of phones behind Cooper as he reached, yanked, and muttered, "Let's see if this is real, boy." The murmurs exploded into chaos. Every network reporter swiveled their cameras toward her. Some shouted questions. Others began recording her phone screen directly. Cooper raised his hands. "This is a misunderstanding. This isn't the full context." The woman didn't flinch. "You tried to humiliate him. You didn't care who was watching. But now everyone." She stepped back into the crowd. The microphones caught everything. Inside a nearby courthouse office, Judge Langston stood at the window, arms folded across her chest. She hadn't spoken to the media. She hadn't spoken to Cooper. She hadn't even spoken to Jalen yet, but she watched. And when she turned to her assistant and said, "Tell Internal Affairs to escalate their review," her voice was calm, deadly calm. Back on the street, Officer Cooper abandoned the podium mid-question. The cameras didn't follow him. They zoomed in on the woman with the red blouse. And the clip would go viral within the hour, captioned with a quote that summed it all up. "You thought no one would say anything, but we filmed you, all of us." The conference room on the 5th floor of the Fulton County Courthouse was soundproof, windowless, and humming with tension. It wasn't the usual courtroom drama. It was the kind whispered about in elevators and sealed behind polished oak doors. The kind where decisions aren't made by judges, but by people in suits who never stand behind a bench. A long mahogany table stretched the length of the room. On one end, chief legal counsel for the city, a white man in his 60s named Merton Blaine. Beside him, Deputy Police Commissioner Howells. Across the table sat 3 more department heads, 2 counsel advisors, and Judge Langston, invited but not informed. "We appreciate you joining us on such short notice, Your Honor," Blaine began, his tone syrupy but firm. Langston gave a cool nod. "I assume this is about your officer filing a complaint against my son." Merton forced a chuckle. "Well, yes, but more broadly, we're here to talk about managing public perception. As you're aware, footage from this morning has gone viral. It's causing community unrest." "You mean accountability?" Langston replied. Howells cleared his throat, trying to redirect. We want to ensure this situation doesn't compromise the integrity of the ongoing civil rights trial. The city can't afford for it to appear biased." Langston raised an eyebrow. "You're worried my presence compromises the trial or your officer's conduct?" Merton leaned in. "Let's be pragmatic, Judge. The boy is your son. That makes this personal." "He was a civilian assaulted in public," she said, voice steady. "That makes it public." A pause. Then Merton tapped a manila folder in front of him. "We're prepared to make a few recommendations for the good of everyone." Langston didn't move. "We'd like to offer a quiet resolution," Merton continued. "Drop the internal review. No charges. In exchange, Officer Cooper makes a public apology, steps down quietly, and your son refrains from media commentary." Langston's eyes didn't flinch. "So the offer is silence, in exchange for no accountability." "We're asking for discretion," he replied, smiling tightly. "We all want to move forward without escalating." Langston stood slowly, every head turned. She leaned slightly over the table, not aggressive, just close enough for her voice to slice through the air like frost. "You came to me, not the other way around. You didn't ask how my son was. You didn't ask how many times he's walked through this city with fear stitched into his breath. You didn't even ask if he was okay." Her voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. "And now you're offering me a deal. Let me offer you something." Instead, she leaned back. "Let the investigation proceed. Let the officer speak. Let the city hear everything. Because I raised my son to survive that silence. But I didn't raise him to obey it." Without waiting for a response, she picked up her folder, turned, and walked out. The door clicked shut. Behind her, like the end of a verdict. Inside the room, no one spoke for a moment. Then the youngest council advisor whispered to Merton, "She's not backing down." Merton exhaled through his nose. "No," he said quietly, "she's not." Meanwhile, in a hallway 2 floors down, Jalen sat on a bench outside the juvenile records office, legs stretched forward, chain still in his hand. He looked up as his mother walked past. Their eyes met for just a second. She didn't say anything, but in that one glance, he knew everything he needed to. The office lights buzzed faintly overhead. 2 agents from Internal Affairs sat at their desks, scrolling through reports, watching body cam footage, and reviewing complaints. There were more than they expected, a lot more. One report detailed a stop involving a black veteran whom Cooper accused of impersonating military personnel. The man had 3 medals of valor and served 2 tours overseas. Another showed footage of Cooper questioning a 13-year-old outside a movie theater for matching a vague description. Despite the boy being in school uniform and backpack still on, and then there were the ones with no footage at all, dozens of them, each stamped with a quiet dismissal, each ending in insufficient evidence. "This wasn't one incident," Agent Royce muttered, leaning back. "It's a pattern." His partner nodded. "He was protected." They stared at the timeline on the whiteboard. Complaints spanned 6 years. Most had been closed within a week. A few never even made it past the intake form. And now, they had a video, they had a courtroom, and they had Judge Langston's silence, which was far louder than any outrage. Meanwhile, across town, Jalen stepped into the hallway of Lincoln High. Everything stopped. Lockers slammed shut. Heads turned. Some stared. Others whispered. He wasn't wearing the chain anymore, but somehow he looked heavier. Not broken, just seen. "Yo, that's the kid from the video," someone whispered near the vending machine. Another nudged his friend. "His mom's the judge. That cop tried to punk him and got embarrassed." Jalen kept walking, through the whispers, through the stares, through the pressure that clung to his back like a second backpack. In the homeroom, his teacher paused mid-roll. "Jalen, welcome back." He nodded once, sat down. Someone from the back whispered, "Legend." Jalen clenched his jaw. He didn't want to be a symbol. He just wanted his chain back. Across the city, Cooper sat at a desk in his precinct, alone. No one had spoken to him directly in hours. He was no longer being debriefed. He was being avoided. He tapped through news alerts on his phone. Another article, another headline. Teens chain becomes symbol in fight against police racism. Judge Langston's son exposes decade of complaints. Anonymous source. Leaks officer's pattern of abuse. He scrolled faster, face flushing. Then he saw it. An old clip. One he'd forgotten, a body cam video of him shouting at a black man at a gas station, claiming the man's tone was aggressive. The man had just said, "I don't want trouble," and Cooper's voice snapped back, "You just made it." He closed the app, turned off the screen, looked around the room, empty chairs, closed blinds, distant voices from somewhere he wasn't invited. He wasn't just under review, he was being documented, and he had no idea how many more tapes were out there. But one thing was certain. The silence that had once protected him was gone. The school intercom crackled to life just before second period. "Attention, students. Please report to the auditorium for a special assembly. All teachers, accompany your classes. This is mandatory." Jalen didn't even react. His classmates were already turning toward him, as if the announcement had said his name directly. He walked with the rest of the crowd down the corridor, hands in his pockets, shoulders tense. Phones buzzed in every pocket. Social media had already guessed it. This wasn't about education. It was about containment. By the time they reached the auditorium, the staff had lined the aisles like security guards. Reporters weren't inside, but word was the district superintendent was. And sitting up front, beside Principal Granger, was a familiar face. Ms. Carlin, the school counselor. The one who had offered Jalen tissues the day his uncle passed. The one who had never said the word race, but always danced around it with phrases like, "students like you." The lights dimmed. Principal Granger stepped to the mic. "We're here to remind our school of what makes us strong. Unity, understanding, and listening to one another." Some students murmured, others yawned. Jalen just stared straight ahead. Granger continued, "And today we'd like to invite a student to speak, someone who's shown resilience in the face of challenge. Jalen Langston, would you like to come up?" The spotlight turned before Jalen even stood. He looked at his counselor, who gave him an encouraging smile like this was therapy with an audience. He didn't move. The silence stretched. Then another voice came from the back. "I'll speak." Heads turned. A girl stood from the senior row. Tall, black, curly hair, brown eyes full of fire. Her name was Tasha Green. She walked down the aisle without waiting for permission and stepped up to the mic. Jalen watched, unsure. "I wasn't asked," she said into the mic, "but I'm tired of being asked to clap for unity every time one of us gets disrespected in public." The auditorium hushed. "I'm tired of speeches after the fact. After chains get ripped. After arrests go viral. After someone's dignity becomes a school-wide lesson plan." A teacher stood from the corner, trying to step forward. Principal Granger gestured for her to stop. Tasha kept going. "You don't need Jalen to speak. He already did. By surviving that moment without snapping. By standing next to his mother, a judge who didn't scream but moved systems." The crowd was quiet, but locked in. "You're not protecting us," she said, turning to the staff. "You're protecting your reputation, your grants, your donors. That's what this is." Jalen's heart pounded. He'd never spoken to her before. Didn't even know she knew his name. Tasha scanned the room. "But we protect each other. That's why I came up here, not to make peace, but to remind you we've been peaceful. You brought the conflict." Applause started in the back, scattered, hesitant, then more joined in. By the time Tasha stepped away from the mic, the whole auditorium was clapping. Teachers didn't stop it. Couldn't. Jalen sat frozen, every emotion bottled in his chest. "Ms. Carlin leaned toward him, whispered, "You sure you don't want to say something?" Jalen turned slightly. "I don't have to," he said quietly. "She already said it." From the auditorium balcony, someone snapped a photo of the standing ovation. It would later be shared with the caption, "This generation doesn't need your script. They've written their own." The package was small. No branding, no sender, no return address. Jalen's mother found it on the front porch one morning after a silent breakfast. She was already in her robe, prepping notes for the upcoming trial. A few steps from the door, and there it was, placed neatly like a gift, wrapped in brown paper, tied with twine. She didn't touch it right away, just stared at it. Then brought it inside, set it on the table, and called her son. Jalen walked in, eyes still puffy from sleep. "What's that?" "Something addressed to you. No postage. Hand-delivered." He tore the paper slowly. Inside, a soft velvet pouch. He opened it and froze. The chain polished, repaired. The clasp was fixed, not a replica. The same chain, every scratch, every tiny groove he knew by touch, still there. Only this time, it had been handled with care. He looked up. "Did you—" Judge Langston shook her head once. "Not me." "No note." She gestured at the empty packaging. "None." Jalen stared at it, heart pounding. This wasn't justice. This was something else. A whisper, a message, and he didn't know who. Later that evening, they sat in the living room. Jalen held the chain between two fingers, letting it dangle like a question. Why would they give it back? Langston sipped her tea slowly. Because they're afraid of what it means if you keep it, and afraid of what it means if you don't. "That makes no sense." "It makes perfect sense to people who deal in symbols," she replied. "They didn't return your chain. They returned the narrative." He looked at her. "But why not say it publicly? Why not own it?" She set her mug down. "Because the system doesn't apologize. It erases. It rewrites. And when that doesn't work," she nodded toward the chain, "it sends peace offerings." In silence, Jalen thought about that, then slipped the chain into his pocket. "I don't know if I want it anymore." His mother looked at him for a long time, then spoke gently. "Then don't wear it because it was yours. Wear it because it isn't theirs." The next morning, headlines erupted again. Someone had leaked footage from a security camera outside the judge's home, someone dropping off a package at dawn. The video was blurry, but the outline was unmistakable. It wasn't an officer. It was a plainclothes man with a badge on his belt. Speculation exploded. Was the chain returned by the department? Internal affairs involvement? Is this a hush protocol? No one claimed credit. And Jalen? He didn't respond. He walked into school that day with the chain around his neck. Not flashy, not proud, just worn, visible, deliberate. A reporter tried to intercept him in the parking lot. "Jalen, did someone apologize to you privately?" He didn't stop walking, didn't answer. But Isaiah, walking beside him, smiled and whispered, "Dude, that silence is louder than any speech." Jalen just nodded, and inside, for the first time in weeks, he didn't feel exposed. He felt armored. The courthouse was closed for the weekend, but Judge Langston never stopped working. Sunday morning. Sunlight filtered through half-closed blinds. A jazz record played low from her office shelf, something from her late husband's collection. Coltrane, soft but tense. The kind of music that fills silence without pretending to fix it. She sat at her desk with a mug of black tea, catching. Up on case notes when the courthouse email pinged. Secure message received, no subject line. No sender name, her brow furrowed. Spam was rare in these inboxes. She clicked it open with caution, glancing first at the sender's metadata. Nothing. Wiped clean. But the message itself was just one sentence. It goes deeper than Cooper. Protect. Your son. Attached. A single PDF. Langston clicked it. 5 scanned documents appeared, stitched together in one file. All internal reports, all stamped confidential, all damning. The first was an HR file from 3 years ago, an anonymous officer complaint against Cooper for verbal intimidation and racially suggestive language during traffic stops. dismissed. Within 48 hours, the second was worse. A citizen complaint alleging physical assault during an arrest. The body cam footage had gone mysteriously missing. Case closed. No sufficient evidence. The third and fourth files were from Internal Affairs. Redacted heavily, but still readable beneath the blackout bars, were recurring names. Royce, Captain Harold Royce. The fifth document made Langston's chest tighten. It was a complaint, never filed, dated only months ago. From an officer trainee who claimed he witnessed Cooper shove a 15-year-old against a squad car, accusing him of acting ghetto because he didn't say, "Sir." The trainee said he was told to let it go by Captain Royce the next day. Langston exhaled slowly. This wasn't just about Brent Cooper anymore. This was about the people who let him thrive. She stood and crossed the room, gazing out the window, toward the street below. Her mind spun through the implications. Cooper wasn't a rogue cop. He was protected, encouraged, weaponized, a product of something much older than this week's viral video. Langston walked back to her desk, sat down, and picked up her pen. She flipped to a fresh page on her legal pad and wrote at the top, Royce. Below that, she started a list. Suppressed IA reports ghosted complaints Cooper's patrol routes racial profile patterns chain incident timeline known department allies. Her phone vibrated beside her. It was the courthouse administrator, Judge Langston. "You're not scheduled until Tuesday. Is everything all right? I need to file an emergency oversight motion." A pause. "May I ask what this concerns?" "Yes," she replied. "Corruption." Another pause. "This isn't about one officer anymore," she said firmly. "This is about who protected him." Across town, Jalen was sitting alone on the bleachers at Glenwood Park. It was late afternoon. The sky overhead was a pale silver, clouds stretched thin like tissue across the sun. He wore a black hoodie pulled halfway up, earbuds in, drowning out the world with something heavy. Kendrick or maybe old Nas, something that knew pain but didn't beg for pity. Isaiah was on the basketball court with a few others, trying to act casual but stealing glances at Jalen every few minutes. Jalen hadn't said much all day. He didn't feel like talking. He was tired of being asked if he was okay. He was tired of "what you're doing is so brave" from strangers who hadn't lived 5 minutes of his reality. He didn't want to be brave. He wanted peace. Just as he started to zone out, his phone buzzed. A new message. Unknown. Number, "He's not the only one with eyes on you. Stay public, stay loud. They're scared of sunlight." Jalen stared at the screen. No name, no signature, just that it didn't feel like a threat. But it didn't feel like safety either. He read it again. They're scared of sunlight. Someone knew what was happening behind the scenes. Someone wanted him to stay visible. He looked around the park, at the cars, at the people on benches. Everyone seemed normal. But for the first time, he realized he had no idea who was watching, and worse, he had no idea who wanted him to win and who wanted him to fall. Later that night, at home, Jalen showed the message to his mom. She read it in silence, then handed it back. "Could be a journalist," she said. "It could be a lawyer, could be someone inside the department trying to warn us." Jalen frowned. "Or someone trying to scare us." Langston nodded. "Yes." "Which one do you think it is?" She looked at her son, her voice low and even. "I think it's both." Jalen exhaled hard. "I'm not used to this, being a name, a headline, a target." "You're not a target," she said. "You're a symbol." "I don't want to be." She leaned forward, serious. "No one wants to be, Jalen. That's what makes the ones who step up different." He looked away. The repaired chain sat on his nightstand. He hadn't worn it since yesterday. Not because he was scared, but because he finally understood it wasn't just his anymore. It had become a flag, and flags draw fire. The next morning, news broke. An anonymous source had leaked more than documents. Audio tapes from within the department had surfaced, whispered conversations. One in particular, Voice 1. Langston's kid made us look bad. We need to push back. Voice 2. Let Royce handle it. He always does. That clip made it to the press within hours. The story was no longer about Jalen. It was about the entire department, and somewhere in the shadows of the system, someone had decided it was time to burn it down from the inside. After the leaked audio goes viral, pressure builds on Captain Royce, who withdraws from public view. Legal and political forces scramble to contain the fallout, while Judge Langston escalates the case against systemic corruption. Meanwhile, Jalen is formally asked to testify, pushing him into a moment of choice between fear and responsibility. The leak cracked open the city's political heart like a fist through glass. The audio, raw and grainy, played again and again. On every network, Langston's kid made us look bad. We need to push back. Let Royce handle it. He always does. 3 voices. One target, and behind them, an entire system exposed. For years, Royce had been known as a stabilizer. Not flashy, not controversial. The kind of man who didn't make headlines because he controlled them. He gave the press safe sound bites, posed for pictures at charity drives, served on advisory boards, talked about rebuilding community trust. But this time, the spin collapsed, because the story wasn't about a mistake, it was about a pattern. The moment the audio hit the 6 o'clock news cycle, phones began ringing in every major department. The mayor's office, police union, internal affairs, civil rights division, and then silence from Royce. No comment, no clarification, nothing. City Councilwoman Renee Akers, a moderate who had once defended Royce's leadership, posted a cryptic tweet just past midnight. It's not the fall that shocks the system. It's the years we all spent pretending gravity didn't exist. Handle it, Royce. The city was no longer behind Royce. It was clearing the path for his fall. At the Fulton County Courthouse, Judge Langston stood at the center of a gathering storm. She sat in her office early the next morning, her fingers steepled as her clerk reviewed updates from legal teams. "There's panic at City Legal," the clerk said, handing over a printed report. "Royce retained private counsel last night, high profile, national level. That's how serious he thinks this is." Langston nodded once, eyes scanning the document. "And Cooper? Still on forced leave, but he's issued a motion to recuse you from any case involving his review." Langston smiled faintly. "Of course he has." She tapped her pen thoughtfully. "Then we filed to expand the scope. Today." "On what grounds?" Langston's tone turned glacial. "Public interest, institutional integrity, and judicial ethics." She moved fast. By 11 a.m., she'd filed a motion to broaden the civil rights suit's parameters to include department-wide supervisory neglect and strategic suppression of misconduct. In other words, the system wasn't on trial anymore. The system was the defendant. Across the city, Royce watched it all unfold from his high-rise condo in Buckhead. A place too clean, too quiet, too far from the chaos he'd once controlled, like a chessboard. He hadn't shaved. He hadn't eaten since the leak. TVs in every room buzzed with his voice, on loop. That one sentence echoing in different inflections. From different mouths. Let Royce handle it. It used to be a compliment. Now it sounded like a threat. Papers were stacked across his glass coffee table, his retirement plan, pension negotiations, years of spotless PR portfolios. None of it mattered now. He knew what was coming. Langston was playing chess, and he'd just realized he was never the king. He wasn't even on the board. He was a piece, and someone had just knocked him over. At the Langston household, Jalen sat across from his mom, the witness form still in his hand. The living room was quiet, except for the soft ticking of a wall clock. He read the lines again. Witness Jalen Isaiah Langston. Date, Friday. Proceeding, expanded civil rights oversight inquiry. He looked up. "Why me?" Langston looked at her son. Because it started with you. Jalen's voice was low. I didn't ask for this. I know. I didn't want to be a symbol. I know that too. He gripped the paper tighter. What if I mess up? What if they twist my words? They will try. So why even speak? She leaned forward, voice soft but powerful. Because you have something they don't. The truth. You were there. You didn't rehearse it. You lived it. He was quiet. Langston reached out, placing her hand gently over his. You don't have to say everything perfectly. You just have to say it honestly. Jalen's throat tightened. All this time he had stayed composed, on the street, in school, at the assembly. But this felt heavier, real. Do I have to wear the chain? His mother's eyes narrowed, thoughtful. Do you want to? Jalen thought for a long time. Then finally he nodded. I want them to see what they tried to take. News of his upcoming testimony spread within hours. It became the next headline. Jalen Langston to testify in police oversight case. Judge's son takes the stand. A city waits. Outside the courthouse, someone laid flowers beside a chalk drawing of the chain. Not broken. Hole painted underneath were the words, "Tell the truth, we've got your back." Inside his condo, Royce watched the footage from his couch. His phone buzzed with calls from lawyers, allies, and reporters. He didn't answer, because in his gut, beneath all the arrogance, the years of power, the certainty, he finally felt something unfamiliar, not exposure, not a scandal, but fear, because he hadn't just underestimated Judge Langston, he'd underestimated her son. And when Jalen stepped into that courtroom, Royce knew there would be no one left to handle it. There wasn't an empty seat in the room. Every bench in courtroom 3B was full. Activists, students, journalists, even off-duty officers pretending to blend in. The lights were brighter than usual. The air was heavier. It wasn't just a hearing anymore. It was history. Jalen sat at the witness table, wearing a crisp white button-down, no tie. The repaired gold chain rested on his collarbone, gleaming faintly under the ceiling lights. He didn't fidget, didn't smile. He looked like someone who'd already lived the worst part and survived it. Judge Langston did not preside. Another judge had been appointed to avoid conflict, but she sat in the front row, off to the side, silent, still, watching. Jalen raised his hand. Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? I do. He took the stand. The questioning began with simple facts. His name, age, school. Can you walk us through what happened that morning outside the courthouse? The lead attorney asked. Jalen nodded slowly. I was walking to meet my mom. She had a hearing that day. I was waiting near the steps. That's when Officer Cooper approached me. Did you provoke him? No. Did you say anything to him before he spoke to you? No. What was the first thing he said? Jalen swallowed. He said, that's not real gold, boy. You people don't wear stuff like that unless it's stolen. A few people gasped softly in the gallery. The judge banged the gavel once. Order, please, Jalen continued. His voice never rose, but it never shook either. I told him I bought it. He said he didn't believe me. Then what? He didn't ask for ID. He didn't ask where I got it. He just grabbed it. Pulled it off my neck. The attorney let the silence breathe. And what did you say after that? Jalen looked straight ahead. I told him, you should Google my mother. Murmurs. The judge didn't stop them. The attorney stepped forward. Jalen, why do you think he targeted you? Jalen didn't rush his answer. Because of what I looked like. Because I didn't flinch when he looked at me. Because he thought he could. Did. You feel scared? Jalen nodded. Did you feel angry? Yes. But you didn't react violently. I didn't react at all. Why not? Jalen's voice dropped just above a whisper. Because that's how you get shot. The words hit the room like a gunshot. Even the judge leaned back slightly. The attorney paused. Thank you, Jalen. No further questions. Then the defense stepped up, a thin man in a grey suit. Nervous, twitchy, he adjusted his tie too often. "Mr. Langston, you mentioned you were wearing a chain." "Yes." "Would you say it was flashy?" Jalen tilted. His head. "It was gold, that's all." "Could it have been misinterpreted as gang-related?" "No, unless black teenagers wearing gold is now a gang." Some people chuckled. The judge shot a glare. The defense attorney tried again. "You didn't have ID on you?" "I did." "Did you offer it?" "I wasn't asked." He shifted, uncomfortably. "But you didn't tell him you were the son of a judge?" Jalen looked at him carefully. "I didn't think I had to." "And why not?" "Because I thought just being a person would be enough." Silence. The defense attorney blinked, cleared his throat. "No further questions." The judge called for a short recess. Jalen stepped down from the witness box, and as he walked back to the bench, every eye in the courtroom followed him, not because he'd said something explosive, but because he hadn't needed to. In a side room nearby, Royce sat watching a live stream on a private screen. His face was pale, his hands clenched. Jalen's voice echoed through the speakers. Quiet, firm, devastating. "I thought just being a person would be enough." The sentence repeated in Royce's mind. He didn't hear the knock at the door until the second time. An aide leaned in. "Captain Royce, you've been summoned." "To testify?" The aide nodded. Royce stood slowly, straightened his jacket, and, for the first time in a long, decorated career, he was the one about to be questioned. The courtroom doors opened with a heavy groan, like they too had grown tired of holding secrets. Captain Royce entered in full-dress uniform, not because it was required, because it was armor, a psychological bluff, one last illusion of control. He walked with shoulders squared, chin up as if posture could erase proof, as if the gold trim on his sleeve could outshine the rot that had leaked into the light. The gallery was full again, but it was a different kind of full. The stares weren't curious anymore. They were cutting, calculated, hungry for truth. Jalen sat quietly near the back. Not front row this time. He didn't want a spotlight. He wanted a vantage point, where he could watch the empire collapse from the inside out. Royce raised his right hand. "Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?" His voice came out thin. "I do." He took the stand, settling into the chair like it hurt to sit still. The prosecutor approached with quiet confidence. "Captain Royce, you've been with Atlanta PD for 27 years. You've served under 3 commissioners. And in that time, you've held command over multiple precincts. Is that accurate?" "Yes." "You were supervising Officer Brent Cooper at the time of his incident with Jalen Langston?" "I was." "Were you aware that Officer Cooper had a documented history of civilian complaints?" Royce hesitated. "Some, yes." "Define some." "I didn't monitor every complaint personally." The attorney nodded. "Understood. Let's help your memory. This," he held up a folder, "is a bundle of 12 complaints filed over 6 years. 6 involve excessive force, 4 involve racial profiling, 2 involve minors." He set it down gently. "All dismissed, all during your tenure." Royce didn't speak. The silence grew uncomfortable. The prosecutor stepped closer. "Were you aware of those 12 complaints?" Royce's jaw clenched. "Yes." "And what actions did you take?" "We handled each matter according to department policy." "And who wrote the policy?" Royce flinched. "Command staff." "So, yourself?" He didn't respond. The attorney didn't press. He turned, clicked a button on the remote. The projector flared to life. Audio again. "Langston's kid made us look bad. We need to push back. Let Royce handle it." The room was dead silent. Royce shifted uncomfortably in his seat. "Is that your voice in this recording?" "Yes." "Who were you speaking to?" Royce cleared his throat. "A fellow officer." "Name?" "I don't recall." The prosecutor raised an eyebrow. So you conspired to suppress fallout from a racially charged incident but can't recall who helped you? Royce didn't answer. The attorney let that silence hang like a noose. Jalen sat forward slightly, not because Royce was breaking, but because this was the first time he'd seen a man in uniform have to explain himself in public. The first time the badge wasn't a shield, but a spotlight. Captain Royce, the prosecutor continued, do you recall instructing Officer Cooper to file a complaint against Jalen Langston? Yes. Why? To cover our bases. Cover them from what? Royce's throat moved. From public scrutiny. From a mistake? No. From a crime. Royce didn't respond. The room watched him squirm. Captain Royce, do you believe pulling a chain from a teenager's neck without probable cause is legal procedure? No. Do you believe it's moral? Royce looked at the floor. No. Then why did you protect the officer who did it? A pause. Because I didn't think anyone would care. There it was, the real confession, not of action, but of assumption, that the silence would continue, that the chain would stay broken, that the kid wouldn't speak. Jalen stared straight ahead, not with anger, not even satisfaction. Just awareness. This wasn't revenge. This was reckoning. Outside, the crowd had grown, not in protest, but presence. People held candles, others held chains, real ones, paper ones, gold-painted plastic ones from party stores. A girl no older than 12 held a poster that read, "His silence was loud, ours will be louder." Back inside, Royce was unraveling in slow motion. The attorney gave him one last document, a memo signed by Royce, overriding an internal affairs recommendation to discipline Cooper after a previous racial profiling complaint. Why did you sign this? Royce looked defeated. Because it was easier. Easier than what? Than fight the system. The prosecutor nodded. Captain Royce, you were the system. When court adjourned, no one applauded. No one shouted. They just exhaled, the kind of breath a city holds when it's waited too long to be heard. Jalen stepped outside into the late afternoon sun. The light hit his chain. He didn't cover it. He didn't touch it. He just stood there. Reporters approached. Jalen, how do you feel? What do you want to happen next? Do you forgive them? He said nothing. Then finally, I don't want anyone's apology. He looked at the cameras. I want prevention. I want a system that can't do this to the next kid. And if my voice made them listen. He paused. Then it wasn't just my chain they took, he turned, and it wasn't just mine they gave back. That night, Judge Langston stood by her son's door. It was slightly open. He was asleep, headphones still in. The chain around his neck glinting in the moonlight. She didn't wake him, she just watched and understood something deeper than verdicts or headlines. Justice wasn't a gavel. It was a ripple, and tonight it had finally started.